I was standing in the kitchen when the seventh call came in. The house felt hollow, like it was holding its breath with me. "Ma'am," the man said, voice lowered to a whisper that carried panic. "Is anyone else in the house right now?" "No," I said. "Why?" He paused, long enough for my pulse to climb into my throat. "I hear a child crying," he said. "From your basement. And it's not a TV." The silence after that line rearranged my bones. I didn't scream. I didn't ask questions. I thanked him, hung up, locked the door, and listened. At first there was nothing. Then, soft, broken, a sound that didn't belong to any machine. A sound that knew fear. My daughter was supposed to be with her father. That was the agreement. Court approved, signed, smiled over. He'd texted me a photo that morning. A playground, a juice box, proof of life. I stood at the top of the basement stairs and felt the old truth settle in. Betrayal never announces itself. It waits to be noticed. I had trusted him because trusting was easier than fighting. Because history has weight. Because once he had been gentle. Once he had held our newborn like something holy. Once he had promised he'd never use her as leverage. I remembered the cracks I ignored. The way he asked for spare keys in case of emergencies. The way he learned my routines like a map. The way he laughed when I said I'd installed cameras. I remembered the basement lock he'd insisted on fixing. I remembered letting him. The crying stopped when I reached the door. That terrified me more than the sound. I called the police. Then I called my lawyer. Then I opened the Notes app where I'd been quietly collecting inconsistencies for months. Dates, times, screenshots. A mother's paranoia, he used to say. Planning doesn't start when you're angry. It starts when you decide you won't be surprised again. They found her, behind the old shelves, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't mine. Alive. Shaking. Silent. In that way children get when adults fail them too loudly. They found fingerprints on the lock. They found messages on his phone that contradicted the photo he'd sent. They found the spare key he'd never returned. And they found me calm. Because while everyone else was reacting, I was executing. I let him believe the story would be about custody confusion. I let him think remorse would soften me. I let him talk. I recorded everything. I filed an emergency motion before sunrise. I forwarded evidence to child services before breakfast. I froze joint accounts before lunch. By evening, the trust my parents had set up, quiet, boring, underestimated, had shifted its voting rights. He called me screaming when his cards declined. I didn't answer. On Monday morning, the board convened an emergency meeting. Different building, glass walls, men who mistook familiarity for immunity. "You're outdated. We're done here," the CEO hissed at me when I arrived uninvited. "Understood," I said quietly. That was the moment the retirement trust activated its voting rights. The room changed. Papers shuffled, eyes recalibrated. Someone cleared their throat like a confession. By the time the vote ended, the question wasn't why I was there. It was who had just fired the person who owned 76% of the shares. I watched the realization land on faces that had never imagined gravity. Could point upward. He wasn't there, but he felt it. Power always does. The confrontation came later. Private, small, he sat across from me in a room that smelled like disinfectant and regret. "You ruined me," he said. I leaned forward. "No," I said. "You misplaced yourself." I slid the documents across the table. Custody revoked. Supervised visits denied. Charges pending. Employment terminated. Reputation irreparable. He reached for the papers like they might burn him. "She cried," he said weakly. "I was just—" "Don't," I said. One word. Sharp enough to end the sentence and the man who wanted to hide inside it. He cried then, loud. Public in the way he'd always accused me of being. I watched without satisfaction. Justice isn't loud. It's precise. At home, the basement is empty. Now. Cleaned. Repainted. Sunlight. Pulled down where shadows used to pool. My daughter sleeps through the night again, so do I. People ask how I stayed so calm, how I knew what to do. I tell them the truth trimmed of drama. I listened. I prepared. I chose myself and my child over the illusion of peace. Betrayal taught me patience. Fear taught me focus. And revenge, real revenge, was never about hurting him. It was about removing his ability to hurt anyone again. I don't regret a single move. I regret only that I ever doubted the sound of my own instincts. Some houses keep secrets. Mine learned not to.